Hey guys, before we start this episode, I wanted to talk to you about Type 1 Lifting. So Type 1 Lifting is a clothing line that proceeds of the shirts and tanks and everything else goes to the Children's Diabetes Foundation. So this all came about with me and seeing a 5-year-old girl in the emergency department that had new onset of diabetes. So just take a look at the website. It's www.type1lifting.com. So just check it out. If you don't buy anything, that's perfectly fine. I would just like for you just to take a look and just see what we have. So like I said before, www.type1lifting.com. And guys, I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Type 1 Lifting Podcast. I have a very good friend of mine. I haven't really talked to him. This is actually the first time we've talked, but I've known him for the past couple of years, and super nice guy. I would like to welcome you, Justin Wright. How's it going?
It's going great, man. Happy to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for being on. So how's Boston treating you right now with the whole COVID-19 stuff?
Honestly, it's not bad. Things are initially, everybody was kind of freaking out, and we were all kind of going through the same thing. I was talking to my fiance about this. I had like a couple weeks at the very beginning where, I was kind of losing my mind a little bit, and now everything's good. I mean, fortunately, the response here has been solid. It seems like Massachusetts as a state is doing pretty well, and we're actually officially opening up to members at the gym tomorrow. So I'm
very
looking
cool.
forward to. So, get people back in the mix, man.
Yeah, so how long you guys been the gym hasn't been open for like 3 months or something?
Yeah, like basically since the middle of March to now, so it's been kind of wild.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, well, they just opened the gyms up, I think, a month ago down in Georgia. So, yeah it's interesting. Like, it's funny, you'll still have like some people like sanitize everything, and then some people will just like get up and walk away or something like that, and you're like, dude, what's wrong with you? So.
What are you doing? Come on, man.
Yeah. And you always call them out, and they're just like, what happened? I'm like, dude, even though you didn't sweat on this thing, just still wipe it down, just please. Yeah.
Please wipe it.
Wipe
everything. Right?
Yeah, I don't want to get it. You don't want to get it, so just leave it alone. So.
Absolutely.
So you actually were a former CrossFit athlete. I mean, you're a former professional exerciser, and you've trained at Back Bay, CrossFit, now CrossFit Invictus. So how did you get involved in CrossFit?
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting story. So I came from the world of combat sports, wrestling, boxing, mixed martial arts, all that stuff. And that was kind of what I wanted to make a run of as far as, the sports world. I was training for some fights, things were going well. And I ended up having a pretty gnarly back injury, which, I'm recovered from now. But at the time, this was actually towards the end of high school going into college, I was in pretty rough shape, and I wasn't really able to train any of the, the fighting stuff as far as like, grappling, boxing, any of that. And one of my buddies who I grew up with was like, oh man, my brother just helped open this CrossFit gym. And I was like, what the hell is CrossFit? And he's like, well, they pull workouts from CrossFit.com, and you should check it out, whatever. And sure enough, I started kind of doing that training that summer. And then my first year of college and second year of college, I found a group of other guys I was like, hey, I feel like I recognize that workout, and kind of went over and talked to them. And they were like, oh yeah, we're following whatever, CrossFit workout. And at the time, there weren't a lot of us, people were still kind of in hiding.
Yeah.
And so I ended up linking up with those guys, and we just started training together, all through the rest of college and the rest of school. And a lot of them are active duty military guys now. So I kind of got, a good dose of getting my butt whipped by some pretty fit dudes. And that kind of started the story for me.
Nice. Now, where was that? Was that in Massachusetts or when?
Yes, sir. I went to Boston College.
Oh, very cool. All right. So, a little fun fact: I actually used to live in Massachusetts, and I used to work at Dillon's off of right on Boylston Street.
No way. That's awesome.
Yeah. I used to be a bouncer / like bartender there. So, yeah, I was.
Spot.
And then I used to work at Brigham Women's Hospital at the emergency department too.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, there you go, small world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So when did you start getting involved into like coaching classes or, you know?
So what ended up happening was one of my still best friends, Mike, who was one of the guys who I was working out with at BC, you know, this is actually kind of a funny story. So there was a woman there named Lauren who was running the group fitness stuff at school. And she was always kind of yelling at it. It was like one of the, you know, those old cartoons where we were like, you know, doing stuff, hanging rings from random things, running around, doing workouts, and she would come yell at us and be like, you know, boys, stop doing this CrossFit business. And so eventually she was like, well, listen, if you want to start teaching some group classes or whatever, you guys obviously have a following of people, you've been training with this group, like, you know, why don't we actually like make it constructive, give you guys some space. And so he and I got our level 1s and started teaching class. And then from there, that woman, Lauren, ended up introducing me to Josh Plosker, who's the owner of Now Invictus Boston. And so it's kind of funny because the one woman who was like yelling at us for doing CrossFit ended up pulling me aside, and she was like, now, I have to be mad at you, but secretly I'm talking to this guy, we're opening this gym, you should come meet him. And so she actually introduced me to you know, our owner and kind of got me into coaching as a career.
Okay, cool. So how was what was the coaching like when you first started out?
So at BC it was funny because, you know, we're on half of a basketball court and we have like, you know, mismatched random colored dumbbells filled with sand and some like small medicine balls, and we kind of had to figure it out. And at first, you know, we had a couple people in class. It wasn't anything crazy, but within, you know, a couple weeks, there was like 30, 40 people showing up for class, and we're like, okay, this is getting kind of crazy. And then by the time that I graduated, we had 90 people showing up for our like BC XFit, as we called it, class. And so we had to get super creative, like, you know, rotating people to different stations. We had people running outside. We had all kinds of crazy stuff going. So that was kind of, you know, it was like a coaching war zone, which ended up being really beneficial for me, you know, coaching in the city, because at our gym, you know, we keep things pretty tight as far as class caps and everything, but even at some of our peak times, there's just a lot going on, and a lot of it's kind of making sure people are safe, because obviously in the city we're limited with space. We don't have, you know, a huge warehouse to run classes in.
Yeah. Now, to all the listeners that haven't seen, you know, Back Bay Invictus, they have like this brick wall, like it's pretty much the whole area is all brick. And like the pull-up bars are on the brick wall, and like you'll see like a lot of like the noble guys like take pictures there, and I love that place. Like if I ever come back up to Massachusetts anytime soon, I you know, that's one place I wanted to hit up. So that place is so cool.
Yeah. We lucked out in that the building is it's like a really historical building. It's got a super cool look, like, you know. So we have a couple locations. The original location that we opened is actually a couple blocks over in like an office building. And that's pretty standard, you know. There's a wine store across the hall, so we couldn't drop weights, you know, whatever. And we ended up finding our Columbus Ave spot, which is the brick building, basically like a year and a half after we opened our original spot. And it just happened to work out where, you know, we had this super cool space. It used to be a gym, so there was already like the flooring and all that stuff. And yeah, it's, you know, a lot of people like the back lifting room because it's like brick and stone walls, and there's a bunch of platforms, and it's a good spot to take photos.
Yeah, that place is so cool. So when in your CrossFit, like, you know, career, do you start realizing like, hey, you know, I'm getting really good at this?
I don't know if I ever realized that, but what I did realize was like, you know, this is fun. I like pushing myself, you know, especially the group of guys I was training with originally were super competitive and all in good fun, but, you know, we were all, it was like the Wild West of CrossFit back then, man. You know, like we're figuring out, like a lot of competitors were figuring out how to do double unders, and like we were all going through that early journey that people go through when they start doing this type of training, and then trying to do it at a high level. And I mean, the old school style of competition was, there was no pacing, like there were no endurance coaches who were teaching people how to do stuff. It was just, we would show up, you know, run ourselves through a brick wall and keel over at the end of the workout, and then come back the next day and do it.
Yeah.
So for me, it was less about being like, oh, I'm pretty good at this, and more about like, wait, you can compete in this. This stuff's awesome. Let's do it. And so I actually remember watching the 2009 CrossFit Games, and remember watching Miko Salo, who is still a badass, but at the time was just an absolute savage, and watching him at the 2009 Games, watching replays of that was when I was like, okay, cool. I kind of want to see if I can make it to that level.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Very cool. And then you actually made it to the CrossFit Games as a team. How many times did you make it to the games? Was it?
We qualified. The team that I was on qualified twice. The second year I didn't compete at the games, so I personally have been once.
Okay, cool. So what was the experience being at the CrossFit Games like?
Oh man, looking back, it really was one of the coolest things I got to be a part of, and that was the last year that it was in Carson, California. So we got to I'm super thankful that I got to experience like the original, not the ranch obviously, but the games in California when it was kind of like the mecca of CrossFit, and it was super cool. I remember the dinner. So there's like an athlete dinner when you show up, and Castro briefs everybody on like a couple things. You still don't know most of the events, but I was an awful swimmer, and I was like, well, at least I'm doing team, and we, they always give us like a raft or a paddle board or something. So I'll just dangle myself on a raft or whatever. And I remember that year at dinner, Castro goes, "This is the 10th anniversary of the games. This is going to be one of and may go down in history as the hardest CrossFit Games of all time. And team athletes, you were doing an open ocean swim." And I was like, well, here we go.
Yeah. So how did that? So did you guys actually do the workouts inside the tennis stadium?
Yeah, we did some. The final workout was inside the tennis stadium. So that year we didn't make the final because it was top 10 teams or whatever. So we did most of our events in either the soccer stadium or the first workout was Team Murph, which was kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
And then we had to swim at like a beach nearby and a couple other places.
Yeah. So what was the environment like in the tennis stadium? I've heard like from other athletes that it's like unreal. So I just want to get your 2 cents into it.
Dude, it's pure energy. It's the reason that a lot of people get into sports, right? Or especially at a high level you have athletes who are kind of jamming out in that flow state. You have the crowd, which is electric. Like everybody's all focused on kind of what's going on the floor. It's hot, which makes it feel kind of like like a gladiators arena. It was super cool. I mean, the energy in there was unreal.
Awesome. That's so cool. I mean, that's one place I wish I was able to, check out and just be like in the stands and seeing like how, all that's like everything being electric, like you said. So, I mean,
yeah.
And I've heard, have you been to Wisconsin yet, or are you planning to go?
I haven't been yet. I may go at some point, but I haven't actually seen the setup there personally. I've heard it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I haven't done myself.
Okay. So when you're coaching in CrossFit Back Bay, and then they actually changed it to CrossFit Invictus. So what was that transition like?
Yeah, so we had been trying to figure out what to do for a little while because we had also acquired CrossFit Fenway, which had been around longer than we had, but it was just it was a good move for us. It was kind of full circle for Josh because when he started training CrossFit and as like a member, he was at Fenway, so it was cool for us to bring that gym into the fold. But what we wanted to do was find a way to unify the gyms and unify the brand because we had kind of our reputation established. We had acquired CrossFit Fenway, but they were still two different entities. And for a while, we tried to get the CrossFit Boston name for a little bit. We were in some talks to acquire that, and then One Nation ended up buying their physical gym, so they ended up getting the CrossFit Boston name with that as part of that deal or whatever. And so we had known the Invictus guys for a while. CJ Martin was our owner's personal coach back in the day. And so they just had a really good relationship, and a lot of their values and what they, tried to, or the standard that they held their coaches to and their facilities, we felt was very in line with us. And so casual talks became more serious talks, and just kind of led to this idea of, why don't we try to establish the Invictus brand also on the East Coast and kind of see what happens. And so it became this kind of partnership where, we rebranded a couple Februarys ago now, I believe. Yeah, so it was a little while ago.
Yeah, I remember when CrossFit Fenway was in the they had their like the garage area, and then they moved it to the other side. So I used to drive there all the time and see them like just throwing weights around and everything, and even like then driving to the other side. Is that Huntington? I forget. Anyway, just seeing those guys like to go running outside, across the new facility back and forth all the time. So I know it's definitely funny seeing like all this stuff go on. But so
they were legends, man. I mean, Fenway was around for a while. When I first started, even the first year of the Open, a lot of the local CrossFit, the Boston area gyms hosted like open events where athletes would just throw down and have fun, and Fenway was a big part of that community. So it was cool for us to be able to kind of keep that going and bring it into a new place.
Yeah, I remember one of my friends that actually graduated high school, Erica Schneider. She was actually, I think she was training at Fenway. So I used to see her just absolutely kill it, and it's like, and I wasn't even doing CrossFit at the time when I saw her like going to like, competitions and stuff. And then one year I was in the military, and I went to this gym in Hanscom Air Force Base, and I saw these guys doing CrossFit. I'm like, well, I do the 300 workout, so I might as well try it out. And so the rest is history. Yeah. And they're like, you don't even need to do the on-ramp program. You're good. So, but
dude, famous last words. I feel like that's how we all start. It's like, oh, that looks fun. Let me see what's going on.
Yeah. So, how's your training in CrossFit Invictus, since you're like not being a professional anymore? You just kind of like scaling it back a little bit, or?
Yeah, man. For me, it's cool. It's like I still work out with a lot of the same crew, but a lot of us are kind of at the same stage of our athletic careers, right? So it's people who used to be part of our quote unquote competition team, and people who we used to throw down with. We still keep the energy going, and I still try to train with a lot of the same people. One of my coworkers, Bern Prince, has been in the game forever as a coach and a member of the CrossFit community, and he and I work out almost every day together religiously. Every day that we train, we train together generally. And so for us right now, it's just about good energy, man. It's I had to, and we can get into this a little bit too, but I had to kind of rediscover my passion for why I train and work out and bring it back to having fun and working out with that community, because when you take it to a professional level, it can be easy to lose sight of that. And so for me now, it's about, let's jam out with some good people, let's put some good music on, good energy. We always try to, whatever we're doing for training, strength work, whatever, that stuff, everybody's kind of doing different things depending on what they need, but we always hit a workout together at some point during that session, and we just try to push each other, man.
Yeah, so did you get burnt out, and that's the reason why you kind of changed?
Yeah, for sure, dude. I actually talked to one of our former coaches, Nate Gagnon, who runs a different facility now. I was on his podcast talking about this a little bit, but for me, I went from being like at the peak of my my performance as a CrossFit athlete, whatever, and that was when the Grid League was rocking and all that stuff. And the next year, I just kind of hit like a rock bottom as far as performance is concerned. I just kind of fell off. I was burnt out. I wasn't recovering. I wasn't performing well, and it became this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where if you're used to performing at a certain level, and then you're not there, or you're getting crushed in the open workouts by people who that you've run circles around in the past, it's hard to not play that comparison game and to bring it to a really negative place. And that's what happened with me is I started, falling off performance-wise a little bit just because of a number of things, dealing with some injuries, all that stuff. But I let it get in my head, and I let it bring me to kind of a negative place for a little while.
Yeah. So going to the Grid League, so did you get drafted by them, or how did that work?
Yeah, so year one, I was helping out from a coaching perspective because the Boston team, a lot of the people I knew, our owner was involved, our owner of our gym, and it was one of those things where it was like, okay, cool, this is pretty awesome. I kind of ended up taking a last minute, jumping in and traveling to one of the combine events in his place because he couldn't go. And that ended up just kind of leading to me being involved with the Boston team from a coaching perspective in the first year of the Grid League, in the first season.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I was coaching it and watching it, at the time, the Grid League kind of aligned well with my strengths as an athlete. Like, I was generally stronger and explosive. You know, at the time, I wasn't the guy to be giving you a 20-minute plus workout,
mm-hmm.
but I was good for short burst strength stuff, and my gymnastics skill set was always decently high. And so I just decided to kind of essentially try out for the league the next year, go to one of the pro days. I got invited to the combine, and then at the combine, based on that performance, you know, I got drafted to the Boston team. And the way that the Grid League worked then too is it was a pro sport, but there wasn't huge money in it or anything. So a lot of the teams would draft with location in mind. So like if you lived close to one of the teams and you were going to get drafted by a team anyways, they tried to make it work out so that you didn't have to, travel all the way across the country or whatever. So that's how I ended up in Boston.
Yeah, and that only lasted like, I believe, 2 years, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, it was 3 total seasons.
Yeah, and so now I guess they're doing like a kind of like a grid league, a smaller grid league down in Florida. So
yeah, so the idea is great. It's one of those things where creating a spectator friendly version of working out for time or whatever is definitely a good idea. And a lot of the seeds that were planted with the Grid League are, they're good ideas. Mm-hmm. And so what's happening now is they're taking it to a smaller level, doing it more regionally or whatever. I think that was really the Grid League's biggest problem, or its Achilles heel, if you will, was it tried to be too big too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea was great, but we got there too quickly. I mean, the first grid match was in Madison Square Garden, which for a new sport is just out of control. Right?
Yeah.
Like it was, I totally respect the dream big concept, and I think that that's great. But when it comes to a business plan, I think that was the ultimate, like I said, Achilles heel of the Grid League.
Yeah. So do you think from like doing CrossFit and then joining the Grid League, do you think that kind of led to the more injuries and not really, performing well in the open?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's funny. So I'm sure and a lot of people know Tolo Morikino, who is one of our coaches and an absolute savage of an athlete. We talk about this all the time and joke around that like the Grid League was the worst thing we did to our bodies. But fortunately, he's a lot younger, so that cumulative damage didn't push him over the edge like it did to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's like Marcus Philly. He always talks about the Grid League. How he was just absolutely thrashed after, and so that's how he started like the functional bodybuilding stuff. And so I even talked to. Actually, and I think Kelly Wild, we talked a little bit about the Grid League too, like how she managed with it and everything. But yeah, I mean, just doing that full throttle like all year long is.
Dude, it kind of jumped the shark a little bit in that some of the original races, if you look at the actual elements and what the athletes were doing, it was cool because what made a professional grid athlete wasn't that the workouts or the movements themselves were anything crazy. It was that they could do them at such a high level and do them so quickly because they were so efficient and skilled and strong and all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But I mean, I remember in the last season we were in the championship against Phoenix, and I'm watching Tola, who's the strongest human being in CrossFit, period. Like, that's a stat line. Like, he has the strongest clean and snatch in the sport. And I'm watching him trying to clean 365 at the end of a race against Danny Nichols, who is also one of the strongest human beings on the planet. And these guys are like absolutely trashed. Like, it tried to get to be too big or to be too challenging or too crazy, or the gymnastics movements, you're doing 73 flips on a bar or whatever. It's just, it started to deviate from the simplicity, which is where I think some of the beauty in the sport was, and just kind of got too crazy.
Yeah. I mean, some of the guys, they were doing like muscle ups, like they're not doing the regular muscle ups. They were like, I think it was from DC or something like that. He was doing these weird butterfly like ring muscle ups, and I'm like, how is his shoulders actually like handling this?
Yeah, the butterfly shoulder dislocators.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I couldn't believe I saw that on Instagram and I was like, is that like how is he able to do that? It's insane. And
that's what happened.
Yeah.
It's just it became a lot of that there was still and not to say that wasn't it wasn't all bad. Like there was some really cool strategy. Like if you look at some of the high level coaches like Justin Kotler from the DC Brawlers, Josh, our Boston coach, a lot of the strategy, the Phoenix team, you start to look at the nuances in the way that people were shaving time and running through these races, and it really was is a cool sport.
Yeah.
I just, there were just a lot of little things that went wrong that when you added up kind of blew up the league.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's sad to see it go because obviously, you kind of want to expand the functional fitness world, and that could have been a great thing, great avenue to get into, but go big because, like you said, they went too big too quick, and even with
too fast.
Yeah, even with the weights too. If you're doing like heavy weights, because obviously the fans want to see people like throw some like ungodly numbers of like for cleans and stuff, that just trashes you. And so
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I'm confident that these regional grid leagues might keep the sport going, and you might see it kind of grow organically in the way that it should have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't necessarily think it's going away. I think that if they because these local leagues are being run really well by smart people, and especially with the Florida Grid League, and there's one in Philly and all this other stuff, and I mean they seem to be doing well, so who knows. I don't think the sport's dead by any means, but hopefully it keeps growing.
Yeah. So I kind of want to get back to coaching for Back Bay. So how do you get people to like buy into what Invictus is and like what you're doing per class?
Yeah, our big thing, really our rule one from day one has always been, we want everybody who comes through the door to feel welcome, whether they're inquiring about the gym and what we do, whether they're a member who's been there forever, whether they're a new member, whether they're dropping in from another gym, another city, another country, whatever it is. We always try to make people feel like it's a friendly place, like we want them to be there, and like we care about them, regardless of who they are. And I think that everything we do stems from that, is all the decisions that we've made from a coaching perspective or from a management perspective always boils down to how can we as coaches care for our members in the best way possible, and furthermore, how can we professionalize coaching? Mm-hmm. One of the guys who you may be familiar with is the founder of Deuce Gym in Venice, Logan Gelbrich, and he wrote the book Going Right, and super smart guy, really, really stellar coach. But their philosophy is very in line with what we're trying to do. Is we want to professionalize coaching. Our coaches are career coaches. The people who are full-time staff at our gym are people who are coaching as a career. They're not just trying to pick up a couple classes after work. Like, these are people who love the art of coaching. They love working with people. They want to learn as much as they can. And we've tried to foster that culture within our staff, which I think has really helped.
Yeah. So what's the programming like for new coaches that are getting into working at Invictus Back Bay? Like, is there like a certain steps they have to make, and if they don't hit it, they kind of send them back a little bit and go over everything?
Yeah. So we have an internship program and kind of a shadowing program. So it starts with, we want our members to see your face, and we want you to get to know our staff, right? So if somebody comes in and we put everybody through some version of this program.
Yeah.
Now, it differs by the coach, right? If you've been coaching for 10 years or whatever, and you know what you're doing, you'll differentiate yourself quickly in this program. We still put those coaches through the same process, but the timeline might be faster because they're able to kind of, differentiate themselves and they have that ability. But, we have every potential coach shadow with our staff, so that they get to know all of our coaches and ask questions and kind of say, see how they run class and everything. But also so our members can get to see them and have them around, because what we never want to do is just bring somebody in, throw them in front of our community and be like, oh yeah, this is, your new coach so-and-so or whatever. And they're like, well, who's this person? I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
So we integrate them in the community. And then, we have a coaching exam that we've created in-house. Like, so obviously people have their own certifications, but we have knowledge that we feel is important as a baseline. And that's not like a pass-fail. That's like a, hey, here's some stuff that we think you should know. If you don't know it, we'll go over it with you and we can kind of talk about it. But we want to kind of gauge that knowledge. And then we have them shadow all our coaches, all our specialty classes. So we have like a weightlifting program, an endurance program, all that other stuff. And this is all pre-COVID, obviously. Right now, we're just happy to open up again.
Yeah.
But we have some specialty classes that they can check out, and then eventually they start to take over portions of class and start to coach classes while getting feedback from from our coaches, from our staff, that kind of stuff.
Oh, very cool, very cool, awesome. So with so when you guys transferred over from just Back Bay CrossFit to Invictus, was there like some pushback from your the people that are actually going to the gym?
Fortunately, no. We've earned a lot of trust from our members over the years, and it was one of those things where people had questions, obviously, just some logistical questions or whatever. But fortunately, they trusted us enough to know that if this is the direction that we felt was a good decision, then they were kind of on board with that. So fortunately, we didn't get much pushback. People just kind of wanted to know, like, will anything change? Like, what does this mean? All that other stuff. And so, we were very transparent with our membership throughout the transition. And to be honest, for the experience for them really didn't change at all. What it did give them access to was more information, being part of that larger Invictus brand that's been established. There's information and knowledge that comes with that Invictus has for their members that they're able to be a part of, but not much as far as like the day-to-day change for them.
All right, very cool. So I kind of want to venture into the podcasting realm, which you've had the More for Your Mind podcast, which I was an avid listener, and so how did you start it, and what were the hurdles that you had to like overcome? Because I know you kind of had, you and I forget her name. I'm sorry about that, but like
Chrissy.
Yeah, Chrissy. Yeah. So you had you two. You talk about one thing, and then Chrissy would talk about something else. So what were the hurdles that you guys had to, deal with in your podcasting?
Yeah. So it started because I was just, I've always been passionate about the mental aspect of training, and it was one of those things that I really dove into heavily when I went through that tough period athletically for myself, right? I had this experience where I was going through a tough patch of time. I was super negative, and it was affecting a lot of other things, and I learned and really dove into, okay, how can I fix what's going on inside my head to get me back to where I need to be, get me back to baseline. And I found that some of that stuff was really powerful, and so I wanted to kind of share that as a facet of what I was working with people on as I was coaching other people. And so I had known Chrissy for a little while. I knew her through the Nova 3 Labs, the company that she had kind of bought into and was helping out with, and I over the years we just spoke. We saw each other at competitions, and I knew that she was pursuing a master's degree in sports psychology, and she was like, going down that avenue. And so I reached out to her. I'm a big fan of just like, and you're much the same way. I remember you reaching out to me on social media, and so I always try to engage with people in that capacity. But I'm a big fan of just like reaching out and connecting with people, and Tim Ferriss has a quote, that your success in life is directly proportional to the number of uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have. And so I'm big on just reaching out, like cold calling, like sending messages to people who I respect. And if they respond, cool. If they don't, cool. But like, you never know, right? You got to take that chance and shoot that message. And so I messaged Chrissy, and I was like, fortunately, I already knew her, but I was like, hey, I know you're doing this sports psychology stuff. I'm super passionate about it. How can we collaborate and maybe create something cool out of this? And she actually had the podcast idea. I had never planned on doing a podcast in any way, shape, or form. But she had this idea. She's like, I've always wanted to do a podcast. She's like, I want to keep it short form. So for us, first of all, we had to say, okay, how do we want to structure this? And so that's why we did the, short episodes. We didn't want to make it conversational, which was good in some ways and bad in others. And that's you live and learn. But we wanted to keep it concise, and we wanted each episode to kind of give an actionable thing that you can do, whether it's like, here's how you do a daily journal, here's how you set goals, do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And that was our goal with the podcast. Now, as far as like hurdles to overcome is, I had no idea how the hell to make a podcast. I didn't know where to put it. I didn't know, I knew nothing. I had very little AV knowledge, and so I did a lot of research, figured out. I kind of set up all the logistics. I told her what mic to buy or whatever, and we were off and running.
Nice. Yeah. So with me, when I started podcasting, I literally bought a 4-way splitter and 2 lapel mics, and I'm actually using an app on my phone to actually do the recording. Yep. So, and it's the Anchor app. I don't know if you've heard of it before.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I just started that, and actually my first episode was spur of the moment. I've told this earlier, but my second episode, there's this girl, she's a type 1 diabetic and Olympic weightlifter, and so I decided, she's actually from Alabama, and she was doing a lifting competition in Georgia, and I was like, well, my kids aren't here, my wife's not here, so I'll just go down to the meet and I'll bring all my stuff. Yep. And we just started doing a recording literally in Panera Bread, and you can hear it, and you can literally hear people in the background of going on. It was funny because I know both of us were nervous because on the car ride, because she hopped in my car to go down to Panera Bread, and we were talking, having a great conversation. Then all of a sudden when the recording started, it kind of got a little nervous for both of us. So it was definitely a learning curve just to try to get the nerves out.
Dude, for sure. And I tell people coaching is like that too.
Yeah.
And it always has been for me, and even to this day I've been coaching forever, and I've been talking to people forever. But before a class starts, I still get a little bit nervous, because it's, even with coaching, you're getting on stage, and it's the same thing like that. Whether you're recording a podcast, you're talking to people on a show, you're coaching in class, you're giving a presentation. It's all that same thing, and the nerves are definitely a factor.
Oh yeah, every podcast I do, I still get nervous. So, and I've done a whole bunch. So yeah, it's I'm getting a little better at it. I think even with talking to my guests. So it's definitely a learning curve. And my full-time job now, I'm a recruiter. So I pretty much call random people on the phone, cold call, and be like, hey, you want this job. And so I've definitely gotten the nerves, less and less of nerves while doing this.
Yeah.
So
that'll help the podcast, and the podcast will help that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So with the More For Your Mind, you guys only made it to 43 episodes. What was the reason for that?
So we were doing an episode a week, and Chrissy is a super entrepreneur. She had been running Nova 3 labs, sold her stake in that, and she's been involved in a lot of other projects, and she's super passionate about building things like that. But that also, everybody's got X amount of bandwidth, and it's tough to take on a lot of things. And it was just one of those things where we kind of outgrew the podcast. It was a fun experiment. We wanted to see, for us, it was never about growing a huge audience or achieving success, whatever that means in the podcast world. We just wanted to talk about some stuff that interested us, share some cool, hopefully useful tidbits with people, and kind of engage with anybody who enjoyed the podcast. And so in that sense, it was a success. We've anything that I can do, the way I personally feel, anything I can do to have a positive impact on people, even if one person says, hey, thanks for that post or that thing that, helped out with whatever I was going through. That's, for me, that's the cool factor. And we just kind of outgrew the podcast. She was super busy with a lot of her projects, which are going really well, and it was just time to move on.
Yeah. So now you have a new one called the Lethal Webcam. So how did
yeah.
I love the title, by the way, but so for all the listeners, if they've seen the advertisements for it, they get the Miami Vice guys and they put their faces on those guys. So it's hilarious. But so how did that come about?
Oh man, so well, that's Bern, who one of my best friends. He and I are like family, and we've coached together and worked out together for almost a decade at this point, and he is just one of the funniest human beings I know, and I'm not necessarily that funny by myself, but he makes me funnier. And so the two of us, like, we just have a banter where some people find it entertaining, and we did a bunch of videos for the open announcements for Invictus, and it kind of started out as this joke where we were like, hey, let's have, like, Vern and I are, we were like, let's have a show and do this stuff. And they were like, okay, you can do you can make a video when the open workout comes out and, like, talk about it and whatever. And we just started being goofy and kind of being ourselves, and we posted it, and people really liked it or whatever, and got a ton of views on the Invictus YouTube and stuff, and so I had this idea for a while of, like, I want to do just a show where we just talk about whatever, and really the premise of the show, I have no idea how long it's going to go for. I have no idea. It's just, the premise of the show is, if we were interviewing somebody, or not even interviewing, if we were sitting at a table with somebody who is cool and interesting, and we were drinking beers and just talking, what would that look like? And that's kind of the goal of the show, is just bringing some cool people on the show who we know or have been introduced to, and just talking about random stuff.
Very cool. Yeah. So obviously you don't know how long you guys are going to do it. So do you have any, like, guests that you want to get on your podcast?
So fortunately, one of the people I was really excited to get on it was my friend Tom Egan, who is a super close friend of mine, but just a really interesting character. And so we got to interview him. So having him on was cool. He was somebody who I definitely wanted to have on there. I mean, he was, if anybody's interested, you can, check out the episode or whatever. But he was a childhood friend of Conor McGregor, and they grew up in Ireland together. And the way he describes it is, we were already just fighting all the time, so we figured you might as well do it as a sport. And so he actually introduced Conor to John Kavanagh, who's his coach, and essentially kind of started Conor's path in mixed martial arts. And so Tom was the first Irish fighter to ever fight in the UFC, Irish-born fighter, and kind of paved the way. So within that specific community, he's kind of a legend. And so it was cool to hear, because I had never really heard, like, the full version of the story from his point of view. So to hear him kind of, like, talk about it was pretty badass. So he was definitely somebody I wanted to have on it. People who we'd want to have on it, man, I mean, there are a lot of cool athletes who we'd love to interview, just to kind of hear about their routines. We like talking to people in the sports or fitness realm, or who have ties to it thus far. But anybody who's interesting, man, I'd be down to talk to a lot of people.
Yeah, very cool. So you're also in the film industry as well. So you're the owner of, I once again, I forget the name. It's like
Inkjet Productions.
Yeah, that's it, Inkjet. So how did that start, and how's that going? Because I know you did a video about the COVID-19 epidemic.
So right now, actually, our editor is finishing up a short version of the documentary on COVID. And so really, man, if I can leave some imparting wisdom in all of this gibberish that I'm spewing on your podcast thus far. I'm a big believer in if you're passionate about something, or you care about something, or you want to try something, do it. Like give it hell, see if it works, see if it's a fit, see if it's something see if it's what you thought it was. Because there have been a lot of times where, like, I want to try something and I think it'll be cool, and you do it and it just wasn't what you thought it was, or it didn't work out the way you thought it would, or whatever. But I think you need to take those chances, and I think that you need to be willing to, like, stick your neck out. And it's funny, I use this reference a lot, but Drake's, like, the rapper Drake's personal trainer is this guy, Johnny Rocks, and he and I have sent many messages over Instagram DMs, and he commented on one of my, like, lifting videos back in the day, and we've spoken over the years. And I asked him, I was like, what's, because he's super successful in this world. I was like, what's your biggest piece of advice? He goes, fail forward fast. Take chances, screw it up, learn from those, and keep going. So that's a very long-winded way of saying that I've always been passionate about films, And when I was growing up, that was the thing that my mom and I did together. We would go to the movies or rent a bunch of movies. And I've just always loved cinema. I love it as an art form. I think it's super powerful. I think we can all remember a movie that made us feel a certain way. And I don't think you can say the same of a lot of other forms of art. Like maybe, some people be like, oh, this painting, whatever. But almost everybody has a movie where they're like, yeah, I either cried like a baby or it made me feel this or whatever. And so I've always been passionate about it. But you kind of grow up thinking that there's this like huge barrier of entry to the film world. Like, I got to go to Hollywood, I got to live in LA and all this other stuff. And I just started looking into it, and I met a couple of the right people. I have a buddy of mine, Brett, who I kind of started this production company with. He's an actor originally from LA. And I was just like, dude, why don't we just like make some stuff? And he was like, yeah, I mean, that's an idea, whatever. And so I wrote out a script for a series, and we filmed the pilot and a couple episodes, and then COVID happened. And so we turned that into a short film, and he had an idea for a short film that we shot or whatever. And I had no idea what part of the business I wanted to be involved in. I was like, do I want to act? I started taking acting classes. I'm like, do I want to do this, whatever? And come to find out, I love directing and being behind the camera. And, he's a great actor, and we have other friends who are good actors, and we have a buddy of ours who had never really acted before, but ended up being like the star of the show in our short film. And so we just started doing it, man. Just started just filming stuff and seeing what happens.
Yeah, I love the part where you said, fail, fast and just go fast. Because I remember you had a post about the squatting ebook that you made. And you had it like, for $20 or something. Then it went to being free to hand out. And actually, I picked it up and it was free. And it was actually a really good book. And you actually described like how failing is okay. And it was definitely a learning process for you too.
Yeah, man. And I was always afraid of it like anybody else was. But and I think it took me kind of landing on the ground hard as an athlete, I think, to ultimately be okay with messing things up and failing and falling short. Because I remember when I was when I was an athlete, it was always, I'm always looking at the leaderboard. It's like, oh, what are they going to think about me if I don't do this and this workout? Or I'm supposed to be the strong guy, so what if I'm not strong? Or what if I'm, like there's so much of that chatter that was going through my mind. And so I'm so grateful for the path that I have followed, and I would never change anything or go back and people are like, oh, would you do something different? And for me, the answer is always no, because I picked up and learned so much through every step of the way. And if I hadn't tried to pursue being an athlete, I probably wouldn't be as comfortable with making mistakes, and I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. And it's one of those things where I don't know if I'll ever make a big movie or be a part of that or whatever, or what'll happen with this documentary. I think the story is really cool, and I'm really excited to put it out into the world, but who knows? But I know that I enjoy the time that I spend doing those things, and it makes me happy, and it improves my quality of life, and so I'm just going to keep jamming and go with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's all that matters. If you're happy with what you're doing, then just keep on going. So
that's it, man.
Yeah, and it's like with me, like unfortunately I have diabetes, and if I didn't have diabetes, like I probably wouldn't have this shirt company. I definitely wouldn't have the shirt company. I wouldn't have this podcast. I wouldn't have probably reached out to you, or and it's I have fun doing this a lot, learning from other people, and it's just crazy what to think of like what my life would be like without type 1 diabetes.
For sure. And even like, you reaching out to me and the stuff that you're doing with the shirt sales and putting money in a good place and doing all this stuff. And like, that's what it's about, man. You make connections, meet cool people. If you can go through life being a good person and just trying to help some people out along the way, I feel like, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're getting close to the end. So what are some of the goals that you're trying to achieve this year, either like via movies, lethal webcam, or fitness wise? What are you trying to reach?
Yeah, fitness wise, I want to stay healthy. I want to keep making progress. But part of that is redefining what success in that realm means for me, and a lot of that is just letting myself have fun with workouts and doing things that I might not do in the past. I want to continue to do some of the mentally grueling challenges, like the 24-hour stuff, and some of the harder things I've done. Those are really fulfilling for me. So continuing to add that stuff in. With the movie side of things, I have a couple other short films I want to create. I've submitted one of the ones we finished to a bunch of festivals. I really want to finish the feature-length version of the COVID documentary. So right now we're going to be putting out a shorter version for a competition, but I want to continue to put out like a longer version of that because I think the story is really cool. And our angle on that is we're highlighting the people who came together in unique ways to help solve the problem. So people who were producing face shields when that wasn't what they do. We have a guy who runs a restaurant group who found a way to feed hospital workers, but also keep other chefs who are out of work employed. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that, and really like human and positive stories that we want to tell. And so, my goal in the film world is to put that out there, and I think it's a message that people need right now. And the big goal is, I say this all the time, but keep my fiance from divorcing me before we get married, because we got a wedding coming up next year.
Yeah, so, yeah. Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you. So yeah, if just keep trying to not drive her too crazy. But,
yeah.
The biggest goal and something that I'm really truly deeply passionate about is to continue to help other people, to spread joy, to spread love. I can't say enough how much I keep falling back on that with everything that's going on in the world, with everything that's happening. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got their own struggles. Yeah. And I try to always, whenever I encounter anybody, you never know what their personal story is, what their what happened to them that day or that year or that week or whatever it is. And so just my biggest goal is to continue to spread love and positivity, and to try to leave a positive footprint on wherever it is I walk this year.
All right, very cool. Well, if you need any nurses in Boston and we need an interview, I know, like, from my experience working in the emergency department, like, everyone knows me, so I can definitely reach out for you if you want to interview anybody.
Hell yeah, dude! I love it and appreciate it. So okay. I'll definitely let you know.
All right, very cool. And then, what's your favorite fitness book or self-help book that you can just constantly read, or you just say you want to give it as a gift, like you always want to give this book out for a gift to somebody?
Yeah. When a book that I give often as a gift actually is called The Miracle of Mindfulness by Tik Tok, and he was a Vietnamese monk. And essentially, it was written as a letter to. There was essentially a group of the monks, of the brothers, who were in a war-torn area and were just going through a really hard time. And his goal was to write a letter to them to essentially remind them of the beauty of mindfulness practice and whatever. I think it's a really good intro to meditation for anybody who's never really dipped their toe in that water. But one of the big reasons I give it as a gift is it's a super easy read. It's short, mm-hmm. So I think that's a really good one. Another easy read that I think is very powerful, especially now, is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Yep. So he's a modern Stoic philosopher, and it's just a very empowering way to think if you can kind of absorb it and apply it. And I always have to kind of direct people to Unbeatable Mind by Mark Divine, because Mark Divine and SEAL Fit for me was the start of my mindset journey, if you will, of mm-hmm. how I got into mindfulness, mindset training, breath work, all that stuff was all through Mark Divine and SEAL Fit. So that would be another good one, is Unbeatable Mind or The Way of the SEAL by Mark Divine.
Yeah, I've read Way of the SEAL. That was a really, really good book. I enjoyed that
stellar.
One. Yeah,
he's an interesting dude. He's a really interesting dude.
Yeah, I would love to meet him in person and just shoot the breeze with him, just to see how he thinks other than reading his books. So
he's one of those guys who is just super cool, and one of our friends who we worked out with at BC ended up interning with him is now an active duty Navy SEAL, and Mark Devine actually pinned his trident at his graduation ceremony.
Oh, very cool.
And we had reached out to him with random questions about fitness when we were in college. I mean, he's getting emails from a bc.edu, email address, and he wrote he wrote us back a really thoughtful and helpful response. And so I've always had a lot of respect for him, because he's the kind of guy who takes the time to give his knowledge to other people.
Yeah, very cool. And then the last two. So what would you tell a trainer that's starting out in the fitness business?
I would give them the same advice I'd give anybody starting out anywhere, and that's find people who you respect, or people who are doing good things in that realm. And if it's the fitness realm, find people who are doing right by their clients and who are successful in that avenue, and study and absorb as much information as you can. I think in the modern world, there's no reason to go through it alone, or to not have a mentor, even if it's not a formal mentorship. With social media, with people being so willing to share information, it's very easy to find somebody to look up to and aspire to emulate, and I think that's a great place to start.
Very cool. So where can people reach out to you because of all your aspects of the film industry, podcast, and social media? Yeah. Where can everyone reach out to you?
I'm one of the coaches at Invictus Boston. My Invictus Boston email is right on our website. You can always email me there, and I'll always try to respond. My Instagram is at Trained Wright. It's my last name, WRIGHT, and Trained. Whatever. You can throw it in the show notes or whatever. But you DM me on Instagram. As you did, right? If you reach out to me, I will always try to respond. It might not be right away, but I do try to respond to people and interact with people. And so you can hit me there, and all the other, our production company is linked on my Instagram. All that stuff's on there. You can, in my bio link, you can check out all the short films and episodes and everything that we have out there. So, feel free to reach out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for doing the show. I really do appreciate it.
No, are you kidding me? I mean, absolutely. It's been fun to talk and rehash old stories and hang out a little bit.
Yeah. So it must be pretty weird from you've only done maybe a couple podcasts, but does it feel a little bit different from being interviewed compared to interviewing other people?
Oh yeah, for sure. I always I've been on a couple different podcasts and as a guest, if you will, and it's always fun because everybody's interview style is different, and each host brings their own unique perspective, and you had some really good questions tonight, and every podcast I've been on, I've gotten some cool and unique questions, so it's always a fun experience.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you very much again.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a great night.
All right.